2024 presidential election looking like Kofi Kingston versus Brock Lesnar. Sad. Just sad. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati, the man who rules the world, takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, because we're having us a barbecue. President Joe Biden has decided to end his re-election campaign for President of the United States. Now, the 81-year-old president has decided to end his re-election campaign for the 2024 election, giving in to mounting pressure from members of his own party. Now, President Joe Biden was on a road to becoming the nominee for the Democratic Party in the 2024 election and looked like he was about to coast to that nomination until a disastrous performance in a debate against former President Donald Trump on June 27, 2024, a debate that came very early as related to the entire election campaign and looked like it was going to be one that would benefit Joe Biden, with him having to confront Donald Trump, who was just dealing with recent convictions as related to a case here in New York regarding a case as related to his business operations and adult film store Stormy Daniels that was brought by New York District Attorney Alvin Bragg, and he was also dealing with the ramifications of a civil case that was brought by a Letitia James here in New York, and was also dealing with other matters that looked like they were possibly going to stain the reputation of former President Donald Trump and give Joe Biden a great advantage as related to their upcoming debate. Not to mention, Donald Trump was also dealing with issues as related to a case as related to obstruction as related to the 2020 election brought by prosecutor Fani Willis, and federal prosecutor Jack Smith had brought a classified documents case against the former president, and the Blue Party hoped to use all of that as leverage against Donald Trump in that debate. Unfortunately, as Joe Biden went to participate in that debate, he didn't give a strong performance because he basically was dealing with possible issues as related to an episode of dementia, and that episode basically had it where he was basically freezing on stage, was not able to present coherent sentences, and could not really even answer any questions, and didn't look like he was presidential or fit for office in this debate disaster. And in the aftermath of that debate disaster, there were, instead of people looking at Joe Biden as capable of taking on a second term and getting 4 more years, what there were calls for was for Joe Biden to leave the race before he wound up doing serious damage to the Blue Party's chances as related to not only the 2024 presidential election, but also to the congressional races that were going on all across the country. And as many in the Blue Party were fearing that they would have to deal with the consequences of a president who did not look like he was fit for office, what many who were low-level members of the Blue Party were calling for Joe Biden to leave the 2024 presidential race. And as those voices started to get louder, there were more prominent members of the Blue Party calling for Joe Biden to leave the race as they started to see their poll numbers start to slip in battleground states, and even started to see their poll numbers start to decline as related to areas where they had a strong lead. And with Joe Biden's approval rating already at an all-time low, that episode that took place on June 27, 2024, at that presidential debate turned out to be a thing that was leading to the Blue Party going from being a place where they thought they had leverage to a place where they were about to lose a lot of support. And that's where we started to see members who were prominent of the Blue Party start to make demands of Joe Biden to leave office. And those range from House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi to, I believe, and Hakeem Jeffries asking for him to leave, not to mention Senator Joe Manchin and even former President Barack Obama. The voices got loud and the funders started pulling their money. Prominent funders like Disney and George Clooney began pulling their money. And as the pressure began to come on to Joe Biden over the coming weeks, eventually things came to a head when even members of his own family demanded that the 81-year-old Joe Biden step away from the race and no longer seek re-election in 2024. And that's what led to this very abrupt and extremely disorganized announcement by President Joe Biden that he would not be seeking re-election in the 2024 election. An announcement that basically in the first letter where he said he was withdrawing from the campaign, he did not even mention Vice President Kamala Harris and didn't even mention her at all. No, the endorsement for Kamala Harris came in a second document showing how completely disorganized the Blue Party is as related to its state after this disastrous debate that took place on June 27, 2024, where the Blue Party looked like it was about to go out here and coast to a nomination and look to wage a campaign against Donald Trump, and hoping that they could wage a campaign against Donald Trump where they hoped that they would be able to win on a campaign where they would go out here and try to paint Donald Trump as the racist and the bigot and the enemy of the American people in an effort to preserve democracy. Now, this whole campaign to so-called preserve democracy basically has blown up in Joe Biden's face and the Blue Party's face because the whole campaign to preserve democracy has fallen apart, and it's fallen apart because they're no longer allowing the voters to be able to choose the candidate at this point. No, what they're doing now is looking to pick a candidate of their own, and that basically just invalidates the whole argument of preserving democracy and making Trump to be out to be the dictator. That's what's happening here as related to that argument, and the whole situation has caused a lot of turmoil in the Blue Party because at this point they basically cannot really have a plan to run a candidate, because the plan to run, if they run any candidate, the candidate would be hampered by the abrupt withdrawal of Joe Biden, one, and the candidate would be hampered too by having to run on Joe Biden's record and the whole state of the union, which has basically been placed in a state of chaos. The entire state of the union has been placed in a state of chaos. So it's a very hard thing to run a new candidate at this point. But members of the Blue Party believe that they can try to rally people behind the Vice President Kamala Harris, and they believe that they can rally people behind Kamala Harris because she is the Vice President. However, I don't think that that's going to be a winning strategy based on Kamala Harris's past record. Now, in 2020, Kamala Harris herself tried to run for president, and she basically wound up leaving the whole race in an ignominious fashion. She was the first candidate to drop out, and as the first candidate to drop out, she left in an embarrassing fashion as related to people going after her horrible record as the Attorney General in California and her previous record of being a prosecutor in San Francisco. And that whole record basically is not really strong enough for her to run as a candidate, even though she was the vice president, because that whole record in and of itself basically is one where she basically persecuted foundational black Americans by holding back people who were incarcerated, and basically went on a campaign to go after black mothers as related to the behavior of their children. So running Kamala Harris basically puts the Biden campaign in a worse position than it was under Joe Biden, because while Joe Biden had already alienated black voters by making a statement where he said that he wasn't going to do anything for black people in December of 2020, and told black people to go to Hispanics if they wanted to get tangibles from Joe Biden, after he told black people to take their booties to the poll to preserve democracy. Instead, what he did was again throw up a middle finger at black voters who have become apathetic and want nothing to do with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's support with black voters has eroded, not to mention his support with non-blacks as well. And trying to run Kamala Harris basically means that they're going to run an even worse candidate than they would with Joe Biden. And that basically means that the entire black voting bloc is off the table, and is off the table not only because of Kamala Harris's terrible record, but is also off the table because most foundational black Americans know that Kamala Harris isn't black. No, we know that she's Jamaican and Indian. So the campaign to try to win on the whole idea of pandering to black female voters on the "you go girl, sister girl" routine, that's basically not going to work. So there are, with Kamala Harris, if they run her as the nominee, she basically will be running without that black voting bloc that Joe Biden desperately needed to be able to win. And that basically is a bad situation for Joe Biden as related to trying to salvage the campaign for the Blue Party in 2024. They're not going to be able to salvage the campaign because Kamala Harris has not been seen as being very interested in helping black people. No, she wants to represent black when it's convenient, similar to what Barack Obama tried to do, and most black people already see through that okie doke. So that whole campaign where they're thinking they can endorse Kamala Harris as their nominee basically is going to be an even bigger disaster, because the queen of word salad is not going to be able to talk her way out of this situation, and she's not going to be able to show people that she's a competent individual as related to being qualified for the White House, not based on reports that her vice presidential office in the past was seen as a chaotic environment, seen as a completely chaotic environment where people were turning over as related to prominent government positions. I mean, here we have a vice president who has been reported as being extremely incompetent and not being able to have a functional work environment, and that's not a good optical look for a nominee to go into a very erratic and chaotic 2024 presidential campaign, when in this type of situation, what the Blue Party would need is a candidate that can unify the people, and unify the people behind an agenda, unify the people behind a direction, unify the people behind a vision for America. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris is not that individual, based on her past performance as related to her previous positions as a prosecutor, as an attorney general, and even a senator. Yes, she meets the check marks for these jobs based on the title of the position, but her performance in each of these positions shows that she is not a person who is fit for office and is not really fit for the position based on the merits of the job. Because again, if you cannot really have a stable vice president's office where everything is consistent and everything is chaotic and erratic, then you're not going to be able to work in the office of president, where Kamala Harris would be completely overwhelmed by the position as related to the power. Yes, she would be the first Jamaican Indian woman president, not a black woman because she's not black, and she would be a poor fit for the job. And that's the thing that has many members of the Blue Party basically quaking in their boots at this point. Basically quaking in their boots at this point because they know they have a lemon for a candidate. They know that they have a lemon for a candidate in Kamala Harris, and they know that this lemon candidate basically is on the road to being a jobber similar to that of George McGovern in 1968, who basically got trounced by Richard Nixon after Lyndon Johnson was forced to not run again after the disastrous issues as related to the Vietnam War. When 1968, basically Lyndon Johnson was in a place where he could not run like Joe Biden because his record was so disastrous, and as a result, they wound up running George McGovern, and as they ran George McGovern, he basically was so far to the left that he basically was not helping to help stabilize the situation as related to many of the baby boomers, as related to their state of their lives, because those baby boomers, when they were teenagers, they felt like their lives were hopeless due to the draft sending them straight to the Vietnam War, a campaign that was anti-black and was designed to send the best and brightest black people into the jungles of Vietnam to be fodder in a war to ironically preserve democracy in Vietnam, but that plan to preserve democracy, like the plan here to preserve democracy, exposed the hypocrisy of the United States. And as it exposed the hypocrisy of the United States, what this did was basically make it where the Blue Party went from being on a road where they were doing well as related to things early in the 60s with John F. Kennedy, to the assassination, and then Lyndon Johnson coming in with the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, which he was forced to sign because the chaos of the country was getting so bad. And here we have almost 60 to 70 years later, the same kind of chaos going on here in the United States. Chaos going on as the country is looking to like it's making, again, a paradigm shift, and the Blue Party, in its efforts to make the world smooth, can't really make the world smooth because they've alienated all of those black people, and like Lyndon Johnson before him, a racist Joe Biden, didn't want to do anything tangible for black people, but in this case, Joe Biden, again, threw a middle finger up at foundational black Americans, and instead of giving black people tangibles, he's now on the Blue Party is on the same place it was in 1968 with the same kind of chaos, and now looking to run a substitute candidate, and I don't believe that substitute is going to do well this time the way it did back in 1968 with George McGovern. No, you're not going to be able to do anything because you didn't want to do anything for black people. And again, with this candidate, Kamala Harris, they go from the frying pan into the fire because most foundational black Americans know that Kamala Harris, 1, is not black, 2, has no interest in doing anything tangible for black people, 3, wants to toe the party line as related to maintaining the white supremacist standards of the Blue Party, and wants to continue on her campaign to go after black people. So many foundational black Americans, they have no incentive to vote for Kamala Harris, even though the Blue Party wants to push her as related to being their nominee, and they believe that they can go out here and get those female voters to go out here and vote for her being female. And I don't think that's going to work because it didn't work for Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was a white woman. And with Hillary Clinton being a white woman and not being able to secure the female vote because of female nature, because women, again, are oftentimes, they don't like working with other women, and they don't want a woman in charge over them. They don't want a woman in charge over them because women really don't like other women, and they don't like to put women in positions of power because female nature, again, women are hypergamous, and again, in hypergamy, they're looking for a man to be that protector and provider, and this is what gave Trump the advantage over Hillary Clinton, who had far more higher credentials than Kamala Harris. So when women look at Kamala Harris, they really don't see a candidate that they believe will look out for them. So I'm looking at this as possibly being a disaster as related to 2024 for the Blue Party, especially if they go out here and pick another female candidate to be the vice president. I really see it as, again, being a disaster for them, and a disaster where basically the Blue Party would be reaping what it sowed, later than what it sowed, greater than what it sowed, because when they went out here and got Joe Biden, basically it was out of desperation, and out of desperation because they wanted to maintain the status quo as related to the system of white supremacy. They didn't want to do anything for black people, and what they're doing now is reaping what they sowed as related to not doing anything for black people. Yes, they wanted the black vote, but they didn't want to do anything for black people. And that's why they went out here and got Joe Biden and got Kamala Harris, thinking, yeah, we pulled one over on black people, but at the end of the day, it's going back to be about black people. And it's going to be back about black people because it's the black voting bloc that's basically going to decide this race as I see it. This is my opinion and my observation. It is the black vote that's going to decide it because many of those groups in Donald Trump's space are solidly behind him, like white women, like Hispanics, and even some people of the Arab communities who really have an issue with the Blue Party as related to Israel. So it's the black vote that would be the deciding vote, but the whole thing is many black people still have no reason to get off the couch because if Kamala Harris is picked as the nominee, that's going to lead from people going from staying on the couch to being convinced to stay on the couch because Kamala Harris persecuted black people, and she further exacerbates the problem as related to black voters because Kamala Harris is not about a black agenda. No, she's like Barack Obama, the veneer of black as related to being the ideal image of what white supremacy considers to be black. I mean, this Jamaican and Indian woman, like Barack Obama, who was basically raised by a white woman, so he's basically a chocolate-covered white man, again, is not interested in helping out foundational black Americans as related to an anti-black hate crime law. We know that to be a fact because Kamala Harris basically is not interested in passing an anti-black hate crime law because she persecuted black people. And we know that she's not about reparations because she's one of these sorority girls who basically is out here all for those black elite. So basically, this is the nail in the coffin for the Blue Party as related to the black vote. Yes, Joe Biden gave Kamala Harris his endorsement, and maybe the Blue Party won't consider her to be their nominee, but if they make her their nominee and think they're going to do something like get a Michelle Obama or somebody else to be the vice president, it's still not going to work. It's not going to work because you've already alienated the black vote, one. And two, what you have done is going out here and you're not talking about anything tangible for foundational black Americans. And three, basically, Kamala Harris is going to have to run on her own record of persecuting black people. She's going to have to run on her own record of her mismanaged and chaotic White House office. She's going to have to run on her already tarnished reputation. And that reputation is far worse than Joe Biden's. And she's also going to have to run on her poll numbers where her approval rating is lower than Joe Biden's. So Kamala Harris basically is going to have to run on a worse record than Joe Biden. But you'll have these leftists who will sit there and say that Kamala Harris has a chance of beating Donald Trump. Well, if you believe that, you would believe that Kofi Kingston could have gone 30 minutes against Brock Lesnar in that on WWE SmackDown. But what's going to happen is reality is going to set in, and basically Kamala Harris is going to come out of this going out the same way Kofi Kingston did when he challenged Brock Lesnar. And we all know that that match lasted under 15 seconds, basically breaking the record for fastest WWE match next to Ultimate Warrior versus Honky Tonk Man. And that's what would happen because Kamala Harris is not a viable candidate. She's not qualified for the office of president, and she basically is a candidate that I would consider to be worse to run than Michael Dukakis or Walter Mondale, who were both jobbers. And basically Walter Mondale, who got curb stomped in 1984, we ain't seen nothing yet. Basically, if she runs, they basically are on a road to a possible Trump landslide, a Trump landslide that will basically be ushered in not only by Biden's disastrous debate and the attempt on Trump's life, but the whole fact is the Blue Party at this point is disorganized, is completely chaotic, and is not showing anybody fit for leadership, and not showing anybody fit for leadership because they haven't been grooming anybody to become that leader since about 2000 when Al Gore lost the election to George W. Bush. The Blue Party hasn't really been looking to organize to create that next leader, and that void as related to power is why we've got this chaotic mess right now, because after Al Gore lost, we got a bunch of jobbers and guys like John Kerry, and basically they were able to slip a jobber by in Barack Obama, who really wasn't a viable candidate. He basically stumbled into leadership because he knew how to talk a good game, similar to the cream of wheat man Eric Adams. However, talk is not action, and with Barack Obama, we got a chaotic White House. Yes, he looked good on the outside, but his policies really did not bring people together in a polarized situation, and he didn't use his influence to try to tone down a lot of the rhetoric, which got progressively worse over the 8 years he was in office. And over the 8 years he was in office, we basically got this entire polarized environment as related to race and politics that just got completely out of control. And everything has been building up as related to the just decline in leadership as related to the presidency, because many of the baby boomers and the silent generation didn't do a good job of grooming the next president or preparing people for leadership roles. No, many of the boomers, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, thought that they would hold their jobs forever, and as they got theirs, they said screw you to everyone. And as they said screw you to everyone, they basically screwed up the country. And that's why we've got this whole chaotic situation where on the right we've got Donald Trump, who basically hijacked the Red Party, and in the Blue Party we've got nothing but chaos where they basically are trying to just run a candidate. And the way they've basically run this candidate I find to be quite ethically questionable. Because if Joe Biden was having issues as related to his health and his cognitive capacity, then I'm wondering how this man had to step down on this, and why are we not invoking the 25th Amendment? Because if he's not fit to be able to do a debate against a candidate, then maybe he's not fit for office, and maybe it's time for him to go overall, because if you're not fit for office, then who's running the country? Critical question I've got to ask about this whole situation. Critical question I've got to ask, because this whole situation is a very disturbing one, indeed, because it's just one that basically shows how our country is a rudderless ship at this point, a rudderless ship as related to the direction of the country, which many people think is going the wrong way, but I believe it's going the wrong way because we just haven't had any sort of real leadership in this country that was really shown by the pandemic, which was just completely mismanaged, not only by Donald Trump, but by idiots like Bill de Blasio and Eric Adams and Gavin Newsom. I mean, basically taking the country into a chaotic direction. And again, no real leadership in any way, shape, or form to reassure the American people or set course as related to things. I mean, you had Joe Biden's campaign, which basically was in denial, telling people the economy was doing well. When we've got college graduates telling us that they can't find jobs, we have inflation at an all-time high, we have unemployment growing in this country because companies are cutting jobs, and not to mention we had the whole disaster with that computer company CrowdStrike. I mean, the country is in a mess, and we don't have anybody setting course or direction, and this is the bad place for America to be in. And the whole thing with Joe Biden, again, stepping down further exacerbates the chaos, and it's not a vote of confidence that people have for Kamala Harris. And to think that you're just going to get people to vote blue no matter who in this place where you have an incompetent candidate, that whole campaign and that strategy just falls completely apart, because if this woman, again, and I repeat it for the third time, could not manage the office of the vice president, then how can she manage the office of the president if she cannot even go out here and take care of business with the position she currently has? Critical question I've got for the Biden bots out here as related to Kamala Harris. And again, vote blue no matter who. That's not going to work this time. Not going to work this time because, again, we look at the terrible record of Joe Biden. And the last thing you want to do is put somebody who is just as incompetent as Eric Adams in place in the White House, because that would lead to even more chaos. And that's what would happen if you put Kamala Harris in office. You would get somebody on the level of Eric Adams' level incompetency, and that's already bad enough with the way Joe Biden mismanaged the border, turning the country chaotic. And again, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, who equally, as I see it, is a guy I don't know. I don't think he's fit for office, but the whole thing is both sides are not really offering us strong candidates. Not offering us strong candidates, but the left side is just more chaotic. But again, this is them reaping what they sowed, later than what they sowed, greater than what they sowed, because like Haman, who came before them, basically they wanted to try to set up a plan to take out Donald Trump with these prosecutions and hope to scare him out of office, and they hoped to set up a gallows to go take out Donald Trump. Unfortunately, they didn't see the gallows they set up for their own candidate. And as it goes to the old saying, if you dig a ditch, you better dig two, because the ditch you dig might just be for you. And it looks like the Biden campaign basically fell into a ditch as they were smugly planning to take down Donald Trump with these prosecutions and all of these other campaigns. And like my analogy about the bad boyfriend, what they did was just make him stronger with each attack, including the one by the dysfunctional 20-year-old male who wanted to take a shot at Donald Trump. The more they attacked him, the more they made him stronger. And as a result, the Blue Party is like the nice guy who attacks the guy for wanting to date the girl with the bad boyfriend. They're in a weak position at this point, and they're at the weakest position at this point because Joe Biden's poll numbers were at an all-time low. Kamala Harris's numbers are lower than Joe Biden's, and the attacks on Donald Trump just made him just that much stronger, and made it where you lost your core voting bloc, and your vote. And the thing is, you lost your core voting bloc of black voters because Joe Biden and the Blue Party took the black vote for granted and did not offer anything tangible to black voters. No, again, I'll repeat it once more. Joe Biden told us to work with Hispanics and thought his minority coalition of minorities would get him over, but the minorities are now looking at Trump. Even Hispanics, who we thought that he was going to get in the bag, and Arabs, who he thought he was going to get in the bag, he's basically lost his minority coalition and the black vote. And again, could have had the black vote had he gone out here and gave something tangible to reward black people for taking their booties to the poll. But instead of black people taking their booties to the poll, black people still have a reason to stay on the sofa on November 5th, because if Kamala Harris is their candidate, then black people have no reason to have a dog in this race, and we have no reason to have anything in this race, because we knew Joe Biden wasn't going to give us anything tangible. We know Kamala Harris won't give us anything tangible, and we know that if a vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for the persecution of black people, so black people have no reason to even get up and take our booties to the poll, because as it relates to this race, there's nothing here for a black agenda. And so since there's nothing tangible here for a black agenda, and no real support for an anti-black hate crime bill, reparations, or qualified immunity, or other issues that black people have, then we have no reason to try to save a democracy from those who participate in hypocrisy. We have no reason to try to preserve a democracy that doesn't want to give black people choice, and we have no reason to save a democracy that is going to be run by a Jamaican and Indian woman who wants to persecute black people. We have no reason to be a part of any of this. And again, I have no reason, since there's nothing on the table for me as related to tangibles, I have no reason to care about anything as related to this election. And I'm not really concerned about who is blue or who is red, since there's nothing on the table for me from any of these guys. I mean, Trump never said anything about giving black people tangibles at his convention speech, and Joe Biden couldn't make his. And again, with Kamala Harris, there's nothing tangible on the table for black people. So black voters, we got no reason to be at the polls on November 5th. We got no reason to be a part of this, because since they didn't want to support black people, we've got no reason to go out here and vote for anyone for any position outside of local offices at all. Now, if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find the books of the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Smith-Dorella trilogy, my black vampire novel, Eternal Night, my black sorority novel, The Thetas, and my book, A Recipe for Success. You can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. Now, if you want to help the channel out, because I don't think I want to monetize this video because YouTube really doesn't like it when you criticize the left, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App, and I prefer you drop it to the Cash App because I get 100% of that money. You can drop it there by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback at e-readers, ISIS, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, A Steam Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.